Hi, and welcome back to Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. I'm your host, John Strazicich, and today, if you have your Bibles, we are beginning with page 1. We're going back to the beginning, going back to Genesis, and I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and so if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open up to Genesis chapter 1. Okay, then coming in here to Genesis, we'll be looking here today at the first 5 verses here. And what you're seeing here, we have the MT here on the top, and then it's followed by the Septuagint translation on the bottom here. And we'll be looking at both texts here, noting any differences. And we'll begin here with Bereshit. So Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim ve'et haaretz. V'haaretz hayita tohu vavohu ve'choshek al pnei tehom ve'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim vayomer Elohim yehi or Vayihi-or, Vayar Elohim, et ha'or kitov, Vayavdel Elohim, bein ha'or uvein ha'choshek, Vayikra Elohim la'or yom, v'la'choshek kara laila, Vayihi erev, Vayihi vocher yom echad. And so basically what, this is just what we will have a traditional translation, and that is what I would prefer. And so we're going to translate this as Bereshit is. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was tohu vavohu, and we'll say formless and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over or hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided between the light and between the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening, and there was morning, day 1. Okay, and then looking here at the Septuagint, it begins here with NRK, so that's going to give us our traditional translation, and remember that all translations, understood the Genesis 1:1, just like the Septuagint did, as in the beginning. And so the Septuagint, though, here says, "In the beginning God made the heaven and the earth was invisible and unprepared, and darkness was upon the abyss, and we can either say the Spirit of God or the wind of God was being brought over the water, and God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light, and God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided between the light and between the darkness, and God called the light Hemeron, day, and the darkness he called night, Nukta here, and there was evening, and then there was morning, day 1. So anyhow, so this is our translation here, and you can see that the Septuagint author preferred here epoiesin for a translation of bara, and we can see that that's carried right straight into the New Testament as well. We'll see this epoiesin here again being used by the New Testament authors. and we'll see that I think Aquila and Symmachus they're gonna give katizo here a little more accurate translation a little bit later here for created, for their choice of translation of bara. But anyhow, you can still understand this as in the beginning God created here the heaven and the earth. And then their choice of translation of oratos here for the earth being unseen or invisible, and that was because you got to look at in backwards because the earth is underneath the water. It's hidden. It's invisible. It's not in sight. Since it's it's a miry clay, then it's unprepared, and so this is the Septuagint's translation here for tohu vavohu up here. This is what they're doing with it here. And then they, the Septuagint could have understood this as the wind of God was being carried over the water here, or being brought over the water. That may be, this is epiphero here, the imperfect used here. This may be the idea about what was behind the Septuagint translator here. But anyhow, in Hebrew, and just as it is in Greek, if we have for Ruach Elohim, this can mean, the wind of God, the breath of God, the Spirit of God. It just context will determine. And you can see how the context here could be very, oh man, you could go with wind or with Spirit. It's very easy, So we'll we'll look at it. We'll understand the Septuagint as using the idea of wind here, and I think that would be appropriate translation here. But anyhow, so this is looking here at our text. And looking at the Septuagint, since this is a very, the Septuagint plays a very important role in the New Testament, because most the New Testament prefers to be following the Septuagint rather than following the Hebrew text, simply because Greek was the lingua franca amongst the diaspora Judaism in the first century at the time of Christ. Okay, then coming here then to this slide, it's we're going to talk about the text here of Genesis 1, and we're not looking here at Genesis 1 is not written poetically. What you will see a lot of people talk about they'll use the term poetry in reference to Genesis chapter 1, but it's definitely not written in poetry, but it's not your traditional type of narrative, because the text is very, very stylistic. And it's framed, and there are repeating phrases, stylistic phrases throughout, that standardize this text, and this is the reason why people are going to then use the term poetic, because it's very, very stylistic in the way that it is written, and it's an enumerated narrative, and I would say an enumerated narrative concerning creation, so it's a creation. It's a report of a creation account that is enumerated, And coming to look at the stylistics here of this first chapter, and we got to remember that really the first chapter of the Bible should have been from 1:1 all the way to 2:3. Okay, so that chapter 1 should have ended at 2:3, and chapter 2 should have started with 2:4 following. That's where chapter 2 should have started. You got to remember that chapter and verse came much later in time, and was never a part of the of the text of the Bible. They were later brought in so that you could easily reference the part of the Bible that you were wanted to find. And it made it very easy. Okay, so coming here to Gordon Wenham, he and it will be followed by all the other commentators, and he notes that there are 10 speech report formulas that introduces God's speeches in chapter 1, and we're going to get the phrase Vayomer Elohim, and God said, and you're going to have this repeated here 10 times. In Genesis here, and they come in verse 3, 6, 9, 11, 14, 20, 24, 26, 28, and 29. And there are 10 of them. And that's important here for the stylistics of our text. And that will be, and this is duly noted. And then what you're going to see down here, this is just, we call this the speech report form, and God said. So this is going to be the first of the stylistic use of language here, that is going to be highly repetitive, and it frames the text. And then there are these commands or divine fiat, let there be. Okay, and I believe that there are 7 of these let there be's. And then there is the execution, and there was light. Okay, so you have the command, let there be, and then there's an account of its execution, and there was. And then typically sometimes there's an evaluation, and God saw that it was good. And then there's naming, and God called the light day, so to speak. And then there's of course there is the enumeration of the day. There was evening, there was morning, day 1. And so we have the enumeration of the days, and so that the whole text is framed here by the 7-day, the first 7 days of creation, and the creative acts only occur on the first 6 days, because the 7th day is the Sabbath, and the day that God rested from all His works, and so that is the way it's framed, and that is the reason also why the first chapter should have extended all the way to 2:3. And we will definitely differ from most of modern scholars who really want to see that the text should be extended from 1:1 all the way to 2:4a, and that's just leftovers of the whole JEPD theory stuff. It's kind of it will definitely come to an end. But there's a lot of scholars now that, like Gordon Wenham, who are going to see that conceptually that the chapter should go from 1:1 all the way to 2:3, because the Toledot formulas don't end a text; they always begin a text. So sorry there for the JEPD theorists, but anyhow, that is a very, very valid criticism. And sometimes your hypothesis of how texts are formed will affect on how you understand where a text begins or it ends, and this is one of those places. And I just prefer to look at it conceptually, that there's 7 days, and so it's perfectly ends there with verse 3. Okay, so the text is highly stylistically framed by the speech report formula here. Vayomer Elohim, God said. Vayehi, let there be. And then the execution, and there was light, or whatever the day that, whatever creation that God brought forth by fiat, then it was the execution. Then was then related, and then the evaluation, the naming, and then the enumeration of the day 1 through 7. Okay, so this is the stylistics that frame the text, that are a part of almost every one of these components are almost a part of every single day. Most of them are, and we'll see that how it works out within the text as we move through it. Okay, then coming here then to Umberto Cassuto. If you don't have his translation here and his commentary on Genesis, his 2-volume commentary, it would be helpful for you to definitely want to have this in your library. This is an excellent commentary here from last century. Anyhow, so Cassuto is an excellent interpreter, and he has some things here that I think we should state here, and he has a lot more than just 4. I sometimes I don't know how much I buy into all these different things here, but this is pretty valid here, and we will definitely go ahead and note this, that this is a part of the text, and it doesn't just happen by happen chance. The expression "it was good," this is the evaluation here. So that from the previous slide, the evaluation of what was created, and it was good. And according to Cassuto, it appears 7 times, and the last one states, and then it was very good. Okay, me'od. So this phraseology happens 7 times, and you're going to note that 7 becomes a very big, number here, in symbology here in Genesis chapter 1. And the first verse has 7 words: Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim ve'et haaretz. So there's 7 words here in the very first verse, and so that becomes significant. The second verse has 14 words. All right, and then the last paragraph, what he means by this is on the 7th day. Okay, from 2:1 to 3. The last paragraph has 3 sentences of 7 words each, concerning the 7th day of the Shabbat. And so he notes this here on page 36, but he probably begins at least on page 35 to note, or even 34 to note all of these different similarities here of these how 7 is a very integral word here, and all of its the uses of these words here. And I believe like Elohim occurs like 35 times, so 5 times 7 is 35, so it's multiples of 7. So he picks up on this, and I thought that that was important then to bring out. And so I just brought out here some of them. But if you want to, you can go to his commentary, and you can look there for all of them. Okay, now coming here then to this slide here, what we're going to do is look at some structural analysis of the text. And what you can see, what I've done here so far, I just titled, here for verses 1 to 5, day 1, and this follows the enumeration of the 7 days. And so we have the initial creation of heaven, earth, and light here for the title here of verses 1 through 5. And then I've divided the text down into further units, and that will continue as we move down into verse 3. But standing by itself is A, and this is God's initial act of creation, which is heaven and earth here. And then when we come to verse 2, we have a description of that earth that God created here in verse 1. And then it was it was to be understood circumstantially. Now the earth that God had created, it was formless and void, and darkness was over the water. So this is a description of the earth on the first day when God created it. And so it's basically it's a watery, dark mass that's covered by water, and it's formless, void, and darkness was over the waters. And remember, the Septuagint put it was invisible here. It was unseen because it's hidden underneath the waters. Because remember, the earth does not become visible until day 3. And then when we come to then to 2b here, we have the developmental process of Earth's development, we should say, of creation. We have the action of God's Spirit, moving, and then the object was over the waters here. And so then basically when we have then the Spirit of God, being brought over the waters and then hovering over them, and then it was preparing it for what God was going to do in the process of working with it. So you can, basically, God takes a lump of clay and he throws it on a wheel, and he kind of, when he just flops it down there, it's all formless and void. And then, then his hands are being brought upon it, and like the Spirit of God is brought over it, and it begins to then take shape. So this is basically what's going on here. But when you probably read, Genesis 1 in your mind, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, in your mind you pictured the earth as however right now you depict the earth. In your mind, you're looking at what okay, and should just but when it said in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, it didn't look like anything that you had in your mind, because as you read, you look back and go, oh wow, wow, the earth doesn't even appear until day 3. So my perception of what I was reading in the Bible had nothing to do with reality. And it just shows you how conditioned we are. So when we read words, we associate those words with how we see it in our mind today. Okay. But we gotta then, kind of remove all those lenses there and get back here and follow the text, and then So especially when you read the Septuagint and understand, the reason why they use the word invisible for the earth there, for tohu, as in tohu vavohu, it was invisible and unprepared. They did so because they knew it was hidden beneath the waters. Okay, so this here, just giving some structure, so we can definitely see here that we're taking, Genesis 1:1 as an independent sentence all by itself, and that it's not dependent upon verse 2 here, as Ibn Ezra would say, or Rashi upon verse 3 down further. It's on verse 3, which we don't have here, but he would say, and that's what just to let you know that modern scholars today, most of them, they are going to start off reading Genesis, not traditionally. They're going to say something like, in the beginning, when God began to create the heavens and the earth. So for them, they are going to understand this not bara but bero here as an infinitive, in the beginning of the creation of God's creation of the heavens and the earth. You would probably translate that infinitive clause, something like that. But they're going to put it all, it's then verse 2 would be a paraphrase or a circumstantial clause, and so verse 1 is definitely a dependent clause onto verse 3, and so for them, this helps them with their you would just say with their view of the earth, and that God then is basically, that God didn't create the earth. He's just using, there was already, the earth was already here. He just began to then work with it. So that so if you translate, Genesis that way, then God didn't really create anything in this particular book. There's pre-existent matter, and that at some time, according to Genesis, in the beginning, then God began then to work with this pre-existent matter that he works with and then makes into the heavens and the earth. But we're going to understand it the traditional way, and also the way that the later biblical authors will, that we interpret the Bible by the Bible, and we'll see how the Bible itself will tell us how to interpret verse 1. The Bible itself tells you how to do this. It gives you its own interpretation later on. Okay, then coming to this slide, Gordon Wenham here will be our guide here then to walk us through how scholars are going to interpret in their translations here of the Hebrew text for the first 3 verses. In the beginning, God created. The stark simplicity of this, the traditional translation, disguises a complex and protracted debate about the correct interpretation of verses 1 to 3. For possible understandings of the syntax of these verses have been defended. Verse 1, we'll look at these one at a time. 1. Verse 1 is a temporal clause subordinate to the main clause in verse 2. In the beginning, when God created, the earth was without form, ... The second one, verse 1 is a temporal clause subordinate to the main clause in verse 3. Verse 2 is a parenthetic comment. In the beginning, when God created, now the earth was formless, God said, let there be light. The third option, verse 1, is a main clause, okay, summarizing all the events described in verses 2 to 31. It is a title to the chapter as a whole and could be rendered, in the beginning, God was the creator of heaven and earth. And then coming here to the fourth option here, verse 1 is a main clause describing the first act of creation. Verses 2 and 3 describe subsequent phases in God's creative activity. This is the traditional view adopted in our translation, as well as by myself. Theologically, he states down here at the bottom, theologically, these different translations are of great consequence. For apart from choice number 4, the translations all presuppose the pre-existence of chaotic, pre-existent matter before the work of creation began. So since we know that the Bible, later refers to Genesis 1 as, as creation ex nihilo, the creation from nothing, then that's why choice number 4 becomes our preferred understanding theologically, how to interpret Genesis 1, verses 1 through 3 for chapter 1. Now, coming here to Klaus Westermann, a famous German scholar of the last, pretty much basically of last century here. He refreshingly basically understood this according to the traditional translation here. And he had stated here on page 105 that all ancient translations read, in the beginning God created. So he would follow this, that verse 1 is an independent clause standing by itself. And then he said that the Masoretic punctuation reads, in the beginning God created. So when the MT then came to bara, then they put kamatzes here underneath the bait and the resh, okay, and they didn't read it as bero here with the schwa and the holem here, so that didn't happen. Okay, so this is important for us to note. And then looking here at the Septuagint, then he notes that the Septuagint begins with NRK. And then he notes that the New Testament indirectly affirms this reading when we have in John's Gospel in 1:1, NRK, ein halagos, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So it's making an allusion here by the use of NRK here, and the use of logos here, and because creation was done by God's speech, and so the NRK here would, as he notes, it indirectly affirms the reading that Genesis 1:1 is an independent sentence. It's an independent clause that makes the sentence of verse 1, and so good for Westermann. Okay, then coming then to this slide, I'm We are not going to look at all of this, but I just want to put up here that we have, in Flavius Josephus, in his accounts of antiquities of the Jews, when he comes then to comment on Genesis chapter 1, what does he do? He puts NRK, and then he puts ekktisin here. So he uses the word ktizo here, which it actually is a better translation than using poiesin as the Septuagint did. So he puts here, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. And then, we're going to look at him some more here later on here, but it's important to note that, all ancient translations, they understood Genesis 1:1 to be, an independent sentence, and so that, obviously it's going to be an independent clause if you were going to look at it from a different point of view of how its relation then to verses 1 through 3. So in the beginning, God created. This is the perfect way that we can see here from, at least from, we saw the Septuagint, and we saw John 1:1 in the use of the illusion. And now we're looking at, at Josephus, and he was a first century Jewish historian at the time of Christ. He lived at the time of Christ. So this would be the traditional understanding of how, ancient authors, when they interpreted Genesis and read it, they understood it in the way that, we traditionally have always translated Genesis 1:1. Okay, now coming in here to verses 3, 4, and 5, we will continue our structural analysis. So we have God's call for the creation of light here in verse 3. And so we have the speech report formula, which is Vayomer Elohim, and God said. And then we have the command, and this would be Vayehi, or let there be light, and then the execution, which is Vayehi, or, and there was light, right? And then there's the evaluation, Vayar Elohim et haor ki tov, right? And that God saw that the light was good. So we have the speech report formula that occurs 10 times, and God said, so that this is reported speech, and then we have the creation by fiat here, by word. There's a command for let there be light, and then the execution of it, and there was light, and the evaluation, it was good. And so this is the stylistics that make this text, for some to they get confused with it being, poetic, and it's a very highly stylized narration and enumerated of an enumerated account of creation into a 7-day week, ending with a Sabbath. Okay, now coming then down here to verse 4 here, and then we have we're looking at this here. At first of all, we have the evaluation, and then we have the God's act of division between the light and the darkness. So we have this act of division, and he said, and God divided between the light and between the darkness, and then and when we come to 5, we have the naming, and God called Vayikra Elohim La Or Yom. God called the light day, and the darkness he called Lila. He called night here. So we have the naming of his creation. And then we have the traditional formula of how the enumerated days usually end, and we have Vayehi Erev, Vayehi Voker, Yom Echad here. So we have evening and morning, and then the enumeration of the day here, and so then this process then begins to be repeated as we go forward for each new day's creation or subsequent development of it. So this is important for us to note these things. So note here in this little box here that there's the speech report formula, God said, there's the command, the execution, evaluation, naming, and enumeration. Very, very important elements. And these elements are the reason, mostly probably, why people are begin to think of this as almost poetic. And I think the stylistics would be descriptive of that. Okay, so we've talked about creatio ex nihilo here, but we need to give some type of verses here that are going to then buttress our remarks here for such a claim. All right, and this is how we are then to understand not only the days of creation, but that God's not working from pre-existing matter, but that God creates something from nothing here. And these are, these aren't exhaustive. I'm just going to give you three, really good scriptures here that would reinforce, the doctrine of, creation ex nihilo here, from nothing. And we'll start here. We'll look at Exodus, because Exodus then falls within the Pentateuch. And we want to see how the Pentateuch itself interprets itself. So when you come to chapter 20, verse 11, Zakor et Yom HaShabbat Lekadsho, that's the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. And then the basis for doing so here is what he was said here. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that's in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the seventh day, and or the Sabbath day, and sanctified it. So everything is made in 6 days, was made within 6 days, and this would also take on emphasis for it being 6 literal days, because this is the commandment to observe the Sabbath on the seventh day, to rest. And then why do we rest on the seventh day? Because it says that Yahweh, made the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh. Okay, so then that gives us the basis. It tells us how to basically understand that Genesis 1:1 was made for our benefit, and the text was working itself all the way to here, to when God brought Israel to Mount Sinai, and then gave them the 10 commandments from the top of Mount Sinai. And then we'll look here at Psalm 33 verses 6 to 9. By the word of Yahweh the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their hosts. The one who gathers the waters of the sea as a heap, and he gives, or he puts the depths into storehouses, Let all the earth fear Yahweh. Let all the inhabitants of the world fear him, for he spoke and it was, he commanded and it stood. Or, the traditional translation, and it stood fast. Here for Vaya'amod, and so this here, this Psalm 33, 6-9 definitely, underscores that they understood that Genesis was to be interpreted as God creating, the heavens and the earth from nothing. Here, so we have Bidvar Adonai Shemayim Na'asu, by the word of Yahweh the heavens were made, by the breath of his mouth all their hosts. I mean, there you go. If you want creation from nothing, ex nihilo, this is your verse right here. And the New Testament is going to confirm this here when the writer says to his audience there, the author of the book of Hebrews, by faith we understand the worlds to have been created by the word of God, in order that which is seen did not come about from that which appears. Okay, so then that would reinforce this idea here of creation from nothing. It would support the understanding here of Psalm 33, 6-9. So this is the reason why we take, when you look at the Bible, there's really no context for Genesis 1:1. We're going all the way back to the beginning, so to speak. So you're going back to bare bones. And that, and nobody was there to witness it except God and the angels. Well, then we have to see how the rest of the Bible then looks upon, upon creation. And then we see here, so that we have Psalm 33, we have Exodus, 20:11, we have Hebrews here. So these are some of the verses that that different Bible interpreters, scholars, pastors, teachers will use to support the doctrine of creation from nothing, and I think that is a good way to go. Okay, now coming here then to this slide, this is an important point here to underscore. We're looking here. He's passed on here, but this Professor James Barr was in Oxford. Don here, he taught at Oxford, and so we're going to look here at, he had written a letter to a friend of his. So what we're looking at is an extract from a letter written in 84 by Professor James Barr, who was the Regius Professor of Hebrew at the University of Oxford. And this is what he said: probably, so far as I know, there is no professor of Hebrew or Old Testament at any world-class university who does not believe that the writer or writers of Genesis 1-11 intended, and that's the target word, intended to convey to their readers the idea that creation took place in a series of 6 days, which are the same as 24-hour days as we now experience them. B, that the figures contained in Genesis genealogies provide simple addition, a chronology from the beginning of the world up to later stages in biblical story. C, Noah's flood was understood to be worldwide and extinguished all human and animal life except for those in the ark. Or to put it negatively, the apologetic arguments which suppose the days of creation to be long eras of time, the figures of years not to be chronological, and the flood to be a merely local Mesopotamian flood, are not taken seriously by any such professors, as far as I know. And I thought, and if there's anybody who would know, it would be James Barr. And so that, according to him, everyone understood, Genesis 1, there was evening, there was morning, day one, and then there was evening and morning the second day, and so on and so forth. We're talking about 24, hour days here, and the days are not meant to be taken, as a metaphor, or it's to be taken very literal. And as we just saw in the past slide there, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat L'Echad showed, remember the seventh day to sanctify it. That's the fourth commandment. Why? Before, in 6 days, the Lord, created the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that's in them. Okay, so there there you go. This is talking about a literal 24-hour day, and it's reaffirmed for us, in the Ten Commandments. And I don't really think that we understand the Ten Commandments, as poetry or as something figurative. I mean, it's pretty literal. Don't do this and do this, but do this. There's, honor your father. Remember the Sabbath day. There are things to do and things not to do. And they're the 10 biggies. Okay, and they're definitely not the 10 suggestions. Okay, I wanted to preface that because when we come to this particular slide, we know that there's all different types of ways that people will interpret Genesis here, but we take here the literal 24-hour days here for the days of the creation week here. And we've heard of the Dage A theory, the gap theory, the pictorial day theory, and the framework hypothesis theory. And these are all ways to get around taking the literal, just the normal way that was intended by the authors, the way that the original readers would have understood it. And obviously, along with James Barr, he understood that this would be the traditional way, the author's intention, and the original readers would have understood this as 24 literal days. I mean, God kind of thought that when he gave the 10 Commandments. So if that's the way God thought about it, I guess that's what really happened, because he was the only one who was there. Okay, and the whole day age theory, all these theories, what they're doing primarily is trying to somehow support that the age of the earth is old, and they're accommodating Genesis to popular scientific notions that the earth is millions and billions of years and stuff like this. And although Professor Barr, he understood that this is what the original authors intended. Now, he didn't believe it. He understood. He knew how to interpret the Bible correctly. But he just thought, well, this is preposterous, because we know that science, is correct, and the Bible, is just basically telling us, old science for the, an era that's long past. and that was, how they understood it back in ancient days. But he did not believe, at all that, he didn't believe what he was as he knew what the authors intended and what they understood it. He's just going to say Genesis is wrong, but yeah, this is what the text meant and what it meant by the author and his original readers. Okay, so then what happens is that's not palpable to people that want to have, give the Bible authority. So what they do is then they say, okay, well, let's tweak this. And so they create this day-age theory here that each day is an eon of time. And, if we work in things like this here, right, then how old was Adam at the end of day one? Was he? Then I guess he must have been like 6,000 years old or something. I mean, he could have been 6 million years old. Who knows? I mean, it's day-age theory. So when you understand it, that you can't apply day-age theory to day 6. Well, if you can't apply it to day 6, you can't apply it to any of them. Okay, so that's why it goes right straight back here to the 24-hour literal day, because at the end of day 6, Adam was only, a day old. Now, I mean, I'm sure that God, when He created Adam and Eve, that they were, adults, because He told them to, to be fruitful and multiply. They weren't babies. I don't think God wanted to, change diapers in the garden. So He created them adults, so we could, you just need to then, once you kind of look at these, like the day-age theory here, or the pictorial day or framework day or whatever, you can see, you can pick apart that they don't follow what the rest of the Bible, how it looks back on it. And remember that remember my my channel is Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context driven. So the context of the immediate context, and then the greater context, and especially when you start looking at Pentateuch, at Pentateuchal authority, when you go to then Exodus and look back on Genesis 1, well then you have to interpret it as 6 literal days of creation, because that's the 4th commandment. That's the basis for the 4th commandment. And so I think that all these other theories, all they're doing is trying to accommodate the Bible to modern science, and don't ever do that. If it just naturally works where it works with science, then that's fine. But biblical authority, trumps scientific theories. And that's what we're dealing. We're not, real science is always going to agree with God and the truth. But remember, people try to say it's science, but what it is a consensus of science's hypothesis for what happened. Okay, and so we're not going to follow hypotheses of different scientific views. We're just going to follow the Bible, and the Bible is not going to contradict with known absolute science that cannot be contradicted, such as 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, that's not ever going to be revised anytime soon. Okay, and so it's important that I'm a pretty straight shooter. I'm just interpreting this as the ancient audience would have understood it, the intention of the original author here, and how it was to be received and understood, and I think that I'm following a good hermeneutic. Okay, then coming here, I guess since we worked through day 1 here, I guess it's a good way then to kind of look at the panel structure of Genesis 1, and now, you're going to all modern interpreters are going to use this model here of this panel structure for Genesis 1. That the first 3 days here is where there's the creation of form, and then there's the filling of form. So on day 1 here, it's the beginning of the creation of heaven and earth, but light. Okay, and on the second day here, according to this panel structure, that God made the firmament, and below the firmament was what we would call our atmosphere in the lower on the lower part of the firmament, and waters. Of course, they were still there on day, from day 1 and day 2, and then on day 3 we have then the call for the dry land to appear, and then the gathering of the waters into seas, and so we have the formal separation and appearance of dry land, and also then vegetation. Then God created plant life on day 3. So when you look forward then, at day 4, well then day 4 is where sun and moon and stars were created. Well then that would look back here to the form here of day 1. Then the creation of marine life and birds, well then that would fit into the form of day 2 of the firmament, and then below the firmament we would have our atmosphere and waters, and then we have land animals and mankind, and then that would nicely fit on day 3 because this is where dry land appears. So we have a form here being developed here within the first 3 days, and then the filling of that form following on day 4, 5, and 6, and then the 7th day is rest. So this is basically, a very traditional way that all scholars here would follow the understanding of how these days have correlation of one to another with form, and then function of being filled with life. Okay, this has been another session of Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment, and please do comment and share this with other people. If you found this helpful, then I'm glad, and I'm just simply trying to pass on what I have learned and received, and hopefully this blesses you, and we'll see you back here for day 2.